It's 10:20, I'm Simon Conway. Here's the latest. In the last half hour, the Supreme Court has ruled the definition of a woman in UK law refers to biological sex. Inflation dropped to 2.6% in March, but analysts have warned it's likely to be short-lived. The White House says the US is actively considering tariff deals with 15 countries. And coming up, the leader of Enfield Council has told LBC News that all legal options are being considered over the felling of an ancient tree.
This is LBC News.
Let's get more now on that major ruling in the last half hour. Supreme Court judges ruling that the Scottish Government was incorrect to treat women and trans women the same under the law. This morning they have upheld an appeal by campaigners saying the Equality Act is based on biological sex. Let's get more now with LBC News Scotland political editor Gina Davidson. This refers back to legislation that tried to create better representation for women on public boards in Scotland, and I suppose now we've finally had some clarification about where we stand with it.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon, that's right. I mean, this has been a hugely controversial issue over the last decade or so. We had that piece of legislation brought by the Scottish Government back in 2018 that was supposed to increase the number of women on public boards, and their definition of women, as you were saying there, included trans women. Now, that of course is men who've transitioned to live their lives as women. Now initially, that included people who just self-identified as women, and for Women's Scotland, a grassroots group, they took the government to court on that, and they won, and they overturned that, but the Scottish Government came back and said, well, we're still going to include trans women who have a gender recognition certificate. That means that they have legally changed their gender in law. Now, this has, again, forced for Women's Scotland, they would say, to go back to the courts, and it's ultimately ended up at the Supreme Court, the highest court in the UK, which has unanimously ruled today that when it comes to the definitions of sex and the definitions of woman and man in the Equality Act of 2010, then that refers to people's biology. They say it doesn't include what they were describing, the judges, as certified sex. It doesn't include trans people who have that gender recognition certificate. Now, I have been in a room in the centre of Edinburgh this morning, Simon, with a group of around 50 or so women who have been campaigning on this, and I can't tell you the noise that was created when that judgment was handed down, the cheers, and I think even some tears from the women in that room. And one of them was Nicole Jones, who actually joins me now. She works for Sex Matters. That's an organisation that was intervening in this case. They were on the same side of the argument as for Women's Scotland, and I'm just going to ask her for her reaction to today's judgment.
We're just so relieved that for Women Scotland have been successful, and that the court has it's given the right answer, that the protected characteristic of sex refers to biology and not paperwork. And just, hugely grateful for women for getting us to this point where women's concerns have been validated after such a long period of being told that they weren't valid.
And what do you think this now means, Nicole, for public bodies, for instance, and rape shelters and sports institutions and so on? Will it mean that they maybe now have to go back and look at their policies and practices?
Absolutely. It needs to be taken to the government, to public bodies. What we have now is basically clarity that we maybe had this before, but it wasn't being implemented, and now we have, explicit that this is what it means. This is what the protected characteristic of sex means in the Equality Act.
So some celebrations for you today?
Oh, definitely. Up in Scotland and down in England.
Thank you very much. So, Simon, as I was saying, huge whoops of cheers and applause in this room from the women who've been campaigning for years for this decision today. The Supreme Court judges ruling that the Scottish Government's interpretation of women in that piece of legislation that was introduced 7 years ago now was incorrect. And also they say that there are inconsistencies between how the Equality Act operates and the Gender Recognition Act. And so I think while there's been some clarity, as Nicole Jones just said there, around this particular issue, we may well yet see changes coming down the line to the Equality Act to make sure, I think as far as these women are concerned, that is spelt out much more clearly in the law, and there can be no misinterpretation of it, as the judges have said today.
OK, Gina Davidson, LBC News Scotland political editor, live in Edinburgh with the latest on reaction to that major ruling from the UK Supreme Court. Thanks very much.